"Don't step inside! This is my wife's party!" Marcus, my only son, shouted, his voice slicing through the house I've spent 40 years paying off. In front of me, a glass of red wine splattered across the freshly painted white wall, pounding music mixing with the chaotic laughter of young guests. Serena, my daughter-in-law, smirked and raised her glass while Marcus shoved me hard, making me nearly fall onto the Persian rug my husband left behind. No one reached out to help. They just looked at me like an old object in the middle of a lavish youth party. I am 70, my hands still trembling, but my heart suddenly went strangely quiet. I didn't cry. I slipped into the dark, closed my bedroom door, and opened the little drawer hidden behind the painting. If they think I'll quietly endure, then tonight is the night they make the worst mistake of their lives. And while they spend the night counting spoils, tomorrow morning I will start counting evidence. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Claudine Crawford, 70 years old, living alone in a 2-story wooden house in the suburbs of Charleston, South Carolina, once filled with the laughter of my husband and my son. I'm a widow who devoted the rest of my life to raising Marcus, believing if I sacrificed enough, he would grow up kind. I worked as a nurse at a community hospital for 35 years, used to the smell of antiseptic and sleepless nights, but I never imagined the deepest wound of my life would come from the very person I gave birth to. I love peace, planting lavender, drinking black tea, and reading Steinbeck on Sunday mornings. I am not frail or weak as they think. I have simply been silent too long, and tonight I know that silence has to end. Music boomed from the speaker in the corner, making my walls shake like a cheap bar. 40 people jammed into the house I once painted with my own hands, laughing, drinking, dancing, and shouting as if they were destroying my past for entertainment. Wine streaked the oak floor, the leather sofa was dragged out of place, and my mother's old coffee table was buried under plastic cups and ashes. The Persian rug my husband gave me after I gave birth to Marcus, the gift I've guarded for nearly half a century now, blotched with tomato sauce and beer. I stood there, my hands trembling not from fear, but from the numbness of being betrayed inside my own home. Serena, my daughter-in-law, walked over, lips curled into a perfect smile, voice so sweet it felt fake. "Don't worry, Mama Claudine," she said, topping off a friend's glass. "We'll clean up. It's just a small party." A small party. To her, just a few hours of fun. To me, an outright invasion of every memory soaked with sweat and tears. I moved closer to Marcus. He was on the porch, laughing loudly with men I'd never met. Neon light hit the face of my son, a 35-year-old man, tall and confident, but the look in his eyes was cold, like a stranger. "Marcus," I called softly, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Could you ask everyone to keep it down? This isn't a bar, honey." And Serena, before I could finish, Marcus turned, liquor shining in his eyes. "Can you stop embarrassing me in front of my friends?" he hissed through his teeth. "My whole life you've done nothing but make me look bad." Then he shoved me hard, and I stumbled into the doorframe. The whole room went silent for a few seconds, then someone laughed, and the music blasted again as if nothing had happened. I stood there, my back aching, but no tears fell. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I'm used to being ignored, used to empty apologies, used to watching the child I love most turn into a stranger in my own house. Serena stepped in, a wine glass in hand, eyes gleaming but cold. "You should go upstairs and rest," she said in a sugary voice that made my skin crawl. "We'll clean up after the guests leave." I looked into those eyes, triumphant, like she'd just won a battle I didn't know I was fighting. I turned away and headed for the stairs. The music, the laughter, the shattering glass blended into a funeral march for my trust. Each step felt like trampling my own memories. This house, the one my husband and I built brick by brick with our savings, was now nothing more than a stage for their contempt. In my bedroom, I locked the door. The small room still held the scent of lavender spray I use every night, the only place left untouched. I pulled down the landscape painting to reveal a mini safe in the wall. Inside were the documents I've kept for decades: the deed, insurance, my will, and a USB with footage from a tiny camera marking Marcus doesn't know I installed. A tiny one hidden in the orchid by the entry, something I set up for safety. Tonight, it became a weapon. I set my phone on the desk and opened the camera app. The image was clear. The crowd wrecking the downstairs, Serena. Laughing, Marcus pouring more drinks. I hit record, then sat on the edge of the bed, hollow and strangely calm. I remembered 1978, the day my husband died in a construction accident. Marcus was 2. I stood over the casket, my hand clutching his dusty work boots. I promised myself, I will raise our son right. Whatever it takes, he won't go without. And I did it. I worked double, triple shifts, ate instant noodles to save for his schooling. Every tuition check was a drop of my sweat. I never complained. I believed a mother's love was strong enough to guard her child from life's temptations. But I was wrong. The temptation didn't come from outside. It bloomed inside my own child. The music downstairs faded as the clock hit 4 a.m. I opened the door and stepped into the hall. The air reeked of smoke and booze. Broken glass, vomit stains, muddy footprints from the front door to the kitchen. I picked up a shard from the shattered chandelier. The light pricked my eyes. I photographed every corner table, curtains, rug, walls. Each shot was a piece of evidence. I named the folder Storm 1. I was no longer the mother pushed into a corner. I was the woman collecting truth. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. On the hard drive, I created a new folder, Rebuild. I typed the first line in a note. The night Marcus shoved me, investigation begins. Then I stopped. Another memory surfaced: Marcus at 8, running around with the toy car his father gave him, shouting, "Mom, look at me." I once thought, as long as I'm here, you'll never lose your way. Maybe I was the one lost. I'd walked too far down the road of forgiveness. I looked around the room, our wedding photo, the old bedding, the lamp with a cracked base. I understood that from now on, everything in this house was part of the battle. I checked the camera feed, muted it, and looked at the time. 5:10 a.m. Outside the window, the first light touched the neighbor's roof. I stood, opened the curtains, and let it pour in. Last night, they reveled in victory. Today, I would start counting every scratch, not only on the wall, but in my heart. I brewed a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and laid out a blank sheet. I listed every bit of damage, every item ruined, every name I remembered. Not to demand money, but to record the feeling. The moment trust shatters. Mid-page, I paused. A picture flashed in my mind. The stack of papers Marcus had me sign 6 months ago, saying it was just a property tax update. I remembered it clearly. Serena sat beside me, smiling, telling me, "Don't worry, just some administrative forms." I signed without reading. I set the pen down, a chill running down my spine. I jumped up, opened the file drawer, and searched. Every paper was neatly filed, but there was no copy of that stack. I checked my email, no scans. Marcus had taken them. I looked at the clock, 6 a.m. Outside, the street was waking up. I grabbed my phone and found the number for the Montgomery County Recorder's Office, where I bought this house 40 years ago. As the line rang, I placed a hand on my chest and felt my heart hammering. "Hello, this is Claudine Crawford," I said. "I need to verify my property ownership. I'm afraid something may have been changed without my knowledge." The clerk's voice was gentle, but it chilled me. "Yes, miss. Claudine, your record was updated 6 months ago. The current owners listed are Claudine Crawford and Marcus Crawford joint use." I closed my eyes. In a heartbeat, I heard Marcus's shout from last night, Serena's words, and the laughter after I was shoved. They merged into one soundtrack, the opening of a counterattack I never thought I'd have to wage. The next morning, when the doorbell rang, I figured it was the milkman or a flyer, but on the step lay a cream envelope stamped with the Montgomery County Recorder's Office logo. I opened it without a second thought, expecting the annual tax notice. But when my eyes hit the first line, notice of updated property ownership, my hands shook. And when I reached the name line, my heart stopped. Owners, Claudine Crawford and Marcus Crawford joint use. I read it over and over, hoping my eyes were playing tricks. But the words stayed, clear and cold. My name, the one who paid every loan payment for 30 years now, stood side by side with the name of the son who shoved me into a wall last night. A chill raced down my spine. I dropped into a kitchen chair, the letter trembling in my hands. Morning sun spilled across the table, shining through a crack in the porcelain vase I once dropped. It looked exactly like the crack inside me. I don't remember how long I sat there. Eventually, I picked up the phone phone and dialed the county office. The woman's voice on the other end was polite, but even like reading a script. "Yes, Ms. Crawford, your record was updated in October of last year. According to the documents, you signed to transfer 50% of the property and granted full transaction authority to Mr. Kappa for Marcus Crawford." I went numb. "That's impossible. I never transferred anything to anyone," I said, my voice breaking. She paused, then softened. "Ma'am, the file bears your signature, witnesses, and a valid notarization. I can send copies if you'd like to review." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes, please send them. Today, if possible." 2 days later, the package arrived. I opened each page, forcing myself to breathe. There it was, my signature, clear and slanted the way it always is when I sign in a hurry. I recognized the familiar blue ink, even the slight shake at the last letter. Only, I didn't remember signing any of it. I closed my eyes, digging for the memory, and it surfaced a fall afternoon when Serena brought an apple pie and a bunch of yellow mums, saying she wanted to visit Mom. Marcus came too, carrying a thick stack of papers. He smiled gently and sat beside me at the kitchen table. "Mom, we're helping you update the house paperwork to comply with the new taxes. If you don't sign, you'll get penalized. It's just administrative, nothing to worry about." Serena nodded, her smile sweet as honey. "I brought the documents, Mom. You just need to sign a few spots. Quick and easy." I remember hesitating, the tiny print crammed on the page. But Marcus held my hand, his eyes soft. "I'm an engineer, Mom. I've read everything. Trust me." And I did. I signed without one question. I handed over half my house and the right to decide my life to my only son, all because of 2 words: trust me. I called Marcus as soon as I finished reading the file. 4 rings, then nothing. I called again, then again. Finally, a text popped up. "Mom, I'm in a meeting. Everything's fine. Don't worry. Get some rest." I typed back, my hands shaking. "What did you do to my house?" No reply. Half an hour later, Serena sent a text with a smiley face. "Mama Claudine, don't stress yourself. We've got it handled. The house is for the family anyway. What's the difference?" For the family. An empty line that stabbed my heart. Whose family? Whose? When they treat me like a spare shadow in my own home. I stood, poured myself a glass of water, and my hand still shook. For the first time in my life, I felt real fear, not of being alone, but of a betrayal engineered step by step. Not just the party, not just the shove. A plan carefully prepared, meticulous, signed, notarized, with everything except a conscience. That afternoon, I drove to the county building. The hallway was long and glossy. The smell of fresh paper and floor cleaner caught in my throat. At window 3, a young clerk in a blue blouse smiled. "Miss Crawford, I've printed your file. Here are the notarized copies and signature records." She slid a stack nearly half an inch thick toward me. I flipped through. The first page, transfer of 50% ownership. Next, full transaction authority, allowing Marcus to sell, lease, or collateralize the property without my direct approval. At the end, a notary signature with date and red seal. It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. "Could I get electronic copies too?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Of course, ma'am." I signed the request form and photographed each page with my phone, a new habit I never thought I'd need at 70. When I stepped back outside, the late sun burned my shoulders, but inside I felt only cold. That evening, I sat in the kitchen under the warm yellow light on the chipped wooden table. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Deed, Proof. I saved every photo, memo, and county confirmation. With each click of save, I felt another layer of armor lock into place. Then I opened my banking app, the routine check I make every month for interest. But tonight, I looked closer, and I saw it. For the last 18 months, there were steady small withdrawals, $500, $800, sometimes $1,200. At first, I thought they might be insurance or repairs, but the notes were clear. Authorized withdrawal, Marcus Crawford. I scrolled dozens of them, adding up to nearly $20,000. I called the bank immediately. After a few automated steps, a man came on the line. "Hello, Miss Claudine. How can I help you today?" I kept my voice even. "I have questions about withdrawals labeled authorized under Marcus Crawford. I never approved that." Silence for a few seconds. Then he spoke slowly, carefully. "Ma'am, according to our records, Mr. Marcus has been a joint signer on your savings account for 2 years. He is allowed to transact within the scope of the authorization." I bit my lip until it bled. said. 2 years ago, before I signed those tax papers, which means they'd been laying the groundwork for a long time. I sat in the dark, listening to the clock tick. Everything mapped out like a blueprint of betrayal. First, the bank authorization. Then, the property transfer. Next, the plan to declare me incapacitated. They were surely preparing for it. They were skimming little by little while setting up to swallow everything. I looked around the house. Every familiar object turned foreign. The table where we blew out birthday candles, the frame from Marcus's graduation, the old armchair where my husband watched baseball. All of it felt like props in a giant con where I was the most naive character. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't trust family anymore. I couldn't call old friends. Most are gone, and the rest too far. But I still had myself and my memory. I took a small notebook and wrote the first line. March 17th. Start gathering evidence. Say nothing to Marcus. Don't react. Observe. I set the pen down and breathed deep. Outside, wind moved through the trees, leaves brushing each other like a warning. That night, I sat at my laptop until late, searching attorney elder financial abuse, pages of results. I read every line, weighed every bio. When I reached a name, Naomi Blake, 42, independent attorney in Boston, with multiple wins in similar cases, my chest felt lighter. I hit send message and typed the first words of a new path. My name is Claudine Crawford, 70. I think my son is deceiving me. Then I pressed send. For the first time in months, I felt a sliver of control return to my hands. I shut the laptop, stood, and opened the window. Night air rolled in, smelling of damp grass and cold wind. I looked up at the sprinkling of stars and whispered to myself, "All right, Claudine." They opened the show. "Now it's your turn." I got a call from the office of Bailey and Blake on Monday morning. The woman's voice was young but firm. "Is this Miss Crawford? I'm Naomi Blake. I read your message and the materials you sent. If possible, I'd like to meet in person." This shouldn't wait. That afternoon, I drove nearly an hour to downtown. Her office sat in a red brick building draped in green vines, a polished brass sign out front, Elder Justice Legal Services. The waiting room was small and tidy, smelling of fresh coffee and the soft hum of a printer. When Naomi stepped out, I was surprised she was younger than I expected, maybe 42. Tall, dark hair pulled back, eyes both sharp and warm. "Nice to meet you, Miss Claudine." She offered a steady handshake, calm and resolute. I answered, "I just hope I haven't come too late." Naomi smiled, saying nothing more. She led me into her office walls lined with case charts, bank statements, and photos of elders with their families. We sat across from each other. Naomi opened a black notebook and wrote my name with a fountain pen. "Would you walk me through everything, starting from when you signed papers without reading closely?" I told her detail by detail, the party, the shove, the envelope, the records, the bank, and the feeling of being turned into prey by my own child. She never interrupted. When I paused, she nodded and occasionally jotted a quick note. When I finished, Naomi laced her fingers and spoke slowly. "Miss Claudine, I'll be blunt. This is a familiar pattern. Family members, often children or in-laws, gradually seize an elder's finances. They begin by helping with tax paperwork, then move to transaction authority, then partial transfers, and finally build a case for diminished capacity to legalize everything." She paused and looked straight at me. "What you've described matches at least 7 cases I've handled in the past 3 years. But trust me, if we act correctly, we can take back control." I sat still, feeling my heartbeat grow stronger. For the first time in months, I felt someone standing on my side. Naomi flipped the page and drew 3 bold bullet points. Step 1. Gather every document you've signed in the last 3 years. Contracts, bank forms, insurance, even tax receipts. Step 2. Have your cognition evaluated by 2 to 3 independent experts, a psychiatrist, a neurologist, and a legal specialist. Step 3. File for an emergency asset freeze if we find signs of asset flight. Then she looked up. All 3 need to move almost simultaneously. Any misstep, any offhand comment can be twisted to claim you're not lucid. From now on, Total silence. No confrontations, no accusations. Don't let them know you suspect anything. Let them believe you're naive, I nodded. You want me to play the obedient victim? Naomi smiled. No, you'll play the trusting mother. I'll hold the flashlight. That afternoon, she opened her laptop and set up a secure storage account for me. Scan or photograph everything and upload it here. It's encrypted. Only you and I can access it. I pulled out the deed, insurance, old will, bank statements, the roof repair receipt, even old tax letters I keep in a tin box. She sorted them neatly and color-coded. Green, compliant and safe. Yellow, potentially exploitable. Red, needs urgent review. When she reached the medical power of attorney, Naomi frowned. This has both your signature and Marcus's? I nodded. How long ago? I don't remember. Maybe 2 years? Naomi's tone slowed. I need to verify this because it lets him decide your treatment if a doctor labels you incapacitated. Many abusers use it to place parents in facilities or control insurance accounts. A chill ran through me. You mean they could have me declared incapacitated even if I'm lucid? Entirely possible, with manufactured evidence, say, a friendly doctor or staged witnesses. That's why step 1 is proving the opposite, that you are clear-minded and capable of making your own decisions. She handed me a printed list. 3 independent professionals, a neurologist, a clinical psychologist, and a legal consultant who works with the court. I'll book you this week. Just show up and talk as you normally do. They'll document, sign, and record video. That will be our first legal shield. I stared at the page, the tidy type turning razor sharp. I never thought I'd need tests to prove my own clarity. But Naomi was right, they're building a wall, and I need one of my own to stay standing. She poured me another cup of strong, warm coffee. Can you walk me through every time you signed something, when, where, who was present, what they said, whether there were gifts or meals involved? I began to speak. Naomi wrote with astonishing speed, occasionally looking up to ask a short question. Any witnesses? Did they speak before or after you signed? What was their tone then? I recounted the afternoon I signed the tax papers when Marcus gave me a wool scarf in the color you like, and Serena smiled as she held the pen and pointed to the signature line. I also told her how Marcus once suggested opening a joint account to make it easier to manage utilities. Naomi stopped there and drew a bold red line. Joint account, we must check withdrawal and transfer rights. This could be the starting point of the whole thing. She looked up, her voice firm. Miss Claudine, from now on, do not sign anything, not even a utility slip or an insurance packet. Everything goes through me first. I nodded. In the warm light of her office, I no longer felt like a trembling old woman. I felt I finally had a real ally, someone who knew the law and, more importantly, knew how to believe me. The appointment lasted more than 2 hours. When I stood up, Naomi handed me a small envelope. This is the legal services agreement. I reduced the fee to the basic rate for retirees. You can pay the remainder over time. I took it and looked at the bolded number, not small, nearly 2 months of my living expenses. But I didn't hesitate. I'll pay, I said. I used to think savings meant peace. Now I understand true peace is living in the truth. Naomi smiled, her eyes softening. You're smarter and stronger than you think, Claudine. We'll do this together, I signed. The letters trembled a bit, not from fear, but because I was signing to begin again. On the drive home, the late day wind came through the car window with a distant salt smell. I felt a little lighter. In my purse, the contract sat neatly beside Naomi's card. Naomi Blake, attorney at law, justice for the elderly. At a red light, I checked the rearview mirror and saw my face lined with wrinkles, but my eyes were strangely bright. Maybe because it had been a long time, since I felt heard, since I felt believed. That evening, I sat at the dining table, opened my notebook, and wrote the first line of a new chapter of my life. March 23rd. Met attorney Naomi Blake. She says justice is fragile, but it still has a shape if we don't give up. I closed the notebook, pressed it to my chest, and smiled. Outside, the night wind moved across the porch, dry leaves rustling like someone whispering, Claudine, this time, they won't take anything more from you. 3 days after the first meeting with Naomi, I still couldn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's face, the son I once believed love alone could keep from every wrong turn. Now, every image of him came with Serena's eyes, sharp, cold, and skilled at using losing gentleness as a shell. I sat at the old computer in the small upstairs office that used to be Marcus's high school room. Everything was as it had been. Old report cards, a baseball trophy, a photo of us at his college graduation. But amid those warm memories, I was about to do something I never thought I would step into my daughter-in-law's private world. I remembered something from about 4 months ago. Serena came over to help me submit insurance forms online. That day, she sat at my computer for nearly an hour, typing and smiling, then said, "Your computer is slow, so I saved the password for convenience. Next time you just open it and everything logs in." Back then, I felt touched. At least she seemed to care. Now, the memory chilled me. I turned on the computer, opened Chrome, and checked saved passwords. And just as I suspected, there it was. Email, serena.crawford@gmail.com, password saved. I paused for a few seconds. Part of me felt guilty, like I was doing something wrong. But I remembered the night Marcus shoved me, the sound of crystal shattering, the drunk laughter of young people in the house I'd given my whole life to. The guilt gave way to resolve. I clicked Show Password. The characters appeared cold and clear. I typed them in slowly, heart pounding. In seconds, Serena's inbox opened. Hundreds of emails appeared, mostly ads and shopping offers. I scrolled down to the sent folder. There, the subject lines made my knuckles whiten. The old lady signed. POA done. Next, sell or assisted living. Need updated appraisal. I opened the first email. The words were short and metallic. The old lady signed. Everything's clear. You can start planning the sale. We'll tell her it's about maintenance costs. The old lady, not mom, not Miss Claudine, but the old lady. I read it over and over, like someone was slicing into my chest. I scrolled further. Dozens of messages between Serena and a man named Todd M. from a real estate firm in Charleston. In one email, Todd asked, "She's still living there, right? What's your timeline?" Serena replied, "We'll convince her to move to an assisted living. I already found some facilities, cheap ones, but they look decent." Attached was a fee sheet from a nursing facility and a handwritten note in purple ink. Make her believe it's her idea. I had to brace my hands on the desk. My head swam. They were planning to push me into a facility and sell this house, the one I scrubbed brick by brick when my husband was alive, the home that was my life's pride. I kept scrolling. A thread between Serena and a friend named Lydia, short but loaded. 5 more years and Marcus inherits everything officially. Till then, we can use the funds gradually. She won't notice. I didn't know what hurt more, their greed, or the way they treated me like a useless, oblivious person. I started downloading every email and attachment, the home appraisal, spending sheets, a financial optimization plan for Marcus. There was even a selfie from the brokerage office, Serena making a heart with her fingers, captioned, "Step 2, almost there." I named the folder Serena Mailbox. With every file saved, I felt both pain and clarity sharper each time. I was no longer the mother being deceived. I was becoming the witness to my own life. At email 45, I stopped. A new thread titled, "Meeting with Dr. Haynes, Capacity Documentation." In it, Serena wrote to someone named Dr. Haynes, apparently a private psychiatrist. "I need you to observe my mother-in-law during the next appointment. She forgets things, gets emotional, and mixes up dates. Please make notes discreetly. I'll need them for the legal paperwork later." At the bottom, the doctor replied, "Of course, I can note mild cognitive decline for a preliminary report." I felt the blood in my body freeze. They were planning to document me as impaired even before any evidence. It was all staged. I scrolled down. Serena attached a checklist titled, "Signs of Mental Decline." For witnesses, the list. Read. Confuses times or names. Repeats herself within the same conversation. Forgets bills or keys. Sudden mood changes. Shows suspicion toward her children. At the bottom, a note. Encourage neighbors to confirm these behaviors. Maybe bribe Mrs. Heller next door with a gift card. I had to lift my hand from the mouse as nausea surged. Mrs. Heller, 2 houses down, the neighbor Serena visited with baked goods once a month, was a purchased witness. I printed all those emails, numbered them, and clipped them in chronological order. On each page, I wrote in red, date sender, intent, actual action. The more I wrote, the steadier my hand became. Each note was a stitch closing a wound, bloody but firm. On the last page, I pasted a copy of the first email, the line, The old lady signed. I circled it, bolded it, and wrote beside it, "No more old lady. This is the lawful owner. Claudine Crawford." I carefully filed everything in a plastic sleeve labeled "Original Evidence, Confidential," and placed it in the mini safe behind the painting, the same spot that once held the useless papers Marcus pushed me to sign. Now, that hiding place had become my armory. It was late. Moonlight slid through the curtains, laying a silver stripe across the table. Papers spread across the floor looked like white bones of a beast I had just dissected. I picked up my phone and texted Naomi, "I have the scalpel. Help me make a clean cut." Less than a minute later, she replied, "Excellent, Claudine. Keep every original, lock them up. I'll come tomorrow. Don't delete anything. Don't print more. Everything is legal gold now." I closed the phone and sat quietly. Outside, the night breeze slipped through the window frame, carrying the scent of lavender from the small backyard. I realized the scent had never left. I'd just been too busy hurting to notice. I inhaled deeply and looked toward the orchid pot in the blave. A corner, the mini camera's light blinking softly. Below, the muffled laughter of Serena and Marcus rose from downstairs, drifting through the walls as if they had no idea that from now on, every word and action would be inside my lens. That night, I didn't cry. I simply smiled a small smile of someone who had been shoved down, but stood up with evidence in hand and justice in her heart. The next morning, Naomi arrived right on time with a thin file and a man beside her. He wore a white shirt and a worn leather jacket with frayed elbows. Tall, solid build, square jaw, and steel gray eyes. She introduced him. "This is Victor Hale, 53, formerly a state financial crimes officer. He now investigates family financial abuse independently. I think you and he will work well together." Victor shook my hand, the handshake of someone used to touching the truth firm. No fluff. "Just call me Vic. I won't let you down." I nodded. "I don't need anyone to make me happy, Vic. I need justice, real justice." He smiled slightly. "Justice can come late, but once it arrives, no one can deny it." We sat around the kitchen table. Victor opened his laptop, plugged in a hard drive, and laid out color-printed statements. Each page was a slice of betrayal. "Miss Claudine," he said in a low, steady voice, "I reviewed the statements Naomi sent me, but I need you to confirm these are your accounts, correct?" I nodded. "Good. Now let me show you how they took every dollar from you." He pointed to the screen at a long ledger. Column 1, transaction date. Column 2, withdrawal amount. Column 3, where it was used. Victor traced the first row with his finger. May 12th last year, withdrawal of $9,200, paid for a Napa Valley trip, the Harvest Inn, double suite. Booked under Serena Crawford. July, transfer of $68,000 to the dealership Falcon Motors, purchase of a red sports brand car. September, $17,000 charged at Maison Luxe for a sofa, a marble coffee table, and a crystal chandelier. He looked up. "Do you recognize these?" I was silent. My heartbeat slowed. It was the car Serena flaunted online with the caption, "Our new baby, their baby, fed by my sweat." Victor continued without a pause. October, $8,500 at Aurum Spa Eyelid Surgery and Fillers. Client name, Serena. December, $5,000 for membership at the Charleston Executive Club, auto-renewed annually. He tapped the keyboard and pulled up a cash flow chart. The red lines swelled like an inflamed wound. "These aren't random. It's a small, steady withdrawal pattern, textbook laundering. They split transactions, spaced 2 to 3 weeks apart, never more than $1,500 each time. Regular enough to avoid banking alerts." I stared at the numbers like reading a sentence already handed down. Victor added, "Classic moves by people who know the rules but lack a conscience. And your son, sorry to be blunt, did it by the book." He opened another file named Invest for Mom PDF. "Look here, they created an investment account called Investment for Mom, but the legal owners are Marcus and Serena. The seed money came from your retirement account, $45,000. I checked. All the gains were withdrawn into their sub-accounts. Not a single dollar went back to you." I tightened my grip on the coffee cup. The liquid trembled and rippled. "So," I said softly, "they didn't just take from me, they used my money to profit for themselves." Victor nodded. "Exactly. And if we don't step step in a few months they could move everything under an elder support label and you wouldn't be able to touch it. Naomi cut in. That's why Vic prepared the filings to preserve bank data. We need a judge's signature fast before anything gets deleted or altered. Victor closed the laptop slightly and leaned toward me. With your permission, I'll file today. Once granted, their transactions are temporarily locked. No one can erase history. That becomes the foundation for the main case. I asked, do you think they know we're investigating? Victor shrugged. I suspect Serena's starting to, but I haven't confirmed it. She's clever in a calculating way, but too confident. That's a weakness. He said he'd been in my neighborhood that morning speaking to a few neighbors. One of them, Mrs. Heller, someone I once considered a friend, got nervous when he mentioned Serena. Mrs. Heller said Serena often drops by and asks innocent questions like, does Miss Claudine mix up times? Or has she been calling people by the wrong name? He gave me a serious look. They're rehearsing a memory decline script. Each little question is a brick in the incapacity wall. I let out a long, heavy breath, and here I was thinking she cared, checking in with the neighbors for my sake. Naomi placed a steady, gentle hand on my shoulder. It's not your fault. People like Serena wear a perfect shell. You've already started peeling it off. That afternoon, Victor returned with large prints. He spread them on the table. Serena at Diamond Gallery, trying on a $12,000 diamond bracelet, beaming. Marcus beside her, arm around her shoulder, talking to the salesperson. A temporary invoice with a $2,000 deposit balance due upon transfer receipt. Victor pointed to the corner timestamp, shot 3 days ago at 2:16 p.m. I have store security video confirming they used your linked account for the deposit. This is direct visual evidence. Investment for mom, but the profits flow into their pockets, sometimes words or knives. Which cut deeper for you? That account, or the way they split the cash into small pulls? Tell me honestly below, I'll read every word. I stared at the photo for a long time. I thought I'd feel rage, but I didn't. I felt a strange calm, like standing before a storm, knowing you have nothing left to lose. You know, I said quietly, fear starts to feel like an old illness. Once you're used to it, it stops hurting. Victor nodded. Fear turning into resistance, that's the sign you're coming back stronger. That evening, I sat alone and opened the Case Hale folder Victor made. Inside were dozens of files, photos, statements, affidavits, investigative reports, each carefully numbered. 1. Car purchase. 2. Spa records. 3. Napa trip. 4. Investments. 5. Witness statements. Each number was a cut into the false skin they'd stitched over 2 years. I opened the last file. The bold header read, Recommendation. Request temporary asset freeze under the Elder Abuse Prevention Act. I read every line slowly, understanding that all the pieces were finally in place. Victor sent a short text. Miss Claudine, the file is strong enough for a temporary freeze. They may panic, let Naomi and me handle it. You just stay calm and keep playing the kind mother. I closed the laptop and looked up at the framed photo of my husband. He was smiling gently, his hand on my shoulder. I whispered, Frank, if you were here, you'd say, it's time, Claudine. That night, I sat on the porch under a soft yellow light. Insects hummed in the wind. I felt no rage, no bitterness, only a deliberate quiet, as if the chaos had passed and only a clear plan remained. Tomorrow, Victor would file with the court. Naomi would submit the urgent motion, and I would wait, not for punishment, but for the moment Marcus would understand the cost of betrayed trust. I stood, closed the door, and glanced toward the living room where the dim light fell across the rug. Every stain and scuff reminded me, some wounds can't be erased, but you can use them to redraw the map that leads to justice. And this time, I knew I was headed the right way. The following week, Naomi scheduled 3 appointments, 3 inspection stations for my own mind. The first was with Dr. Peterson, a neurologist who has often worked on court capacity evaluations. Around 60, salt and pepper hair, voice measured like every word had been weighed. Miss Claudine, today we'll talk about memory and time, he said, opening my file. I'll ask a few simple questions, just answer normally. I smiled. As long as you don't make me subtract 7 from 100 backward, I'll be fine. He laughed, and we began. He asked about Marcus's birth date, the last meal I cooked, and and our current state government. I answered clearly, and even shared my former mother-in-law's apple pie recipe. At the end, he said, "Your short-term and long-term memory are well within normal limits. No signs of decline." The second was with Dr. Ellen Moore, a clinical psychologist, sunlit office, watercolor paintings, a light citrus scent. Dr. Moore asked me to describe what was happening. No need to prove, just tell it like you would to a trusted friend, I told her. Piece by piece, from the shove at the party, to the county envelope, to the investment for mom account. When I finished, she didn't interrupt. She just tilted her head, calm and steady. At the end, she noted and said, "Miss Claudine, your emotional responses are fully appropriate to abusive behavior. No signs of paranoia, confusion, or impaired reasoning." She signed the report, attached the interview video and cognitive scoring. For the final appointment, Naomi came with me to see Dr. Hartwell, a forensic decision-making specialist. He placed 3 scenarios in front of me. 1. If someone asked you to sell your house for a smaller place, what would you do? 2. If a family member asked you to sign papers to help manage finances, how would you respond? 3. If a doctor suggested you needed a legal guardian, what would you think? I looked him in the eye and answered cleanly, "Selling a house is personal. I'll read every term before signing. I'd have an attorney review anything before granting any rights. And if anyone says I need a guardian, I'll demand independent medical proof." He watched me for a long moment, then nodded. "Very good, Miss Claudine. You're not only competent, you understand your rights better than most people I see." 3 days later, I received the compiled report. Nearly 200 pages of evaluations, standardized tests, and video interviews signed by all 3 experts. Naomi held it like a shield. "This is the first layer of protection, Claudine," she said. "From now on, no one can declare you incapacitated without risking charges for falsifying records." Naomi immediately filed to temporarily void the prior authorizations I signed under deception. Her motion was direct. My client, Miss Claudine Crawford, was exploited through incomplete disclosure when signing powers of attorney. This violates financial transparency principles and constitutes deceit. We request the court suspend those documents until full investigation. A week later, the court granted the temporary order. The bank and county recorder were notified to freeze all transactions involving my and Marcus's names. Their accounts went under monitoring. Victor called, "Congratulations, Claudine. The first legal wall is up," I answered. "Now I just need to stay calm and see how they react." And indeed, I had to play the trusting mother again so they wouldn't suspect a thing. I called Marcus, light as a breeze. "Are you doing okay, Marcus? I baked some pumpkin bread. I'll drop some off tomorrow." He sounded cheerful. "Thanks, Mom. Serena loves your baking. Please try to get some rest." I smiled, briefly. "Mom's fine, don't worry. I really did bake the bread, wrapped it in foil, and mailed it with a handwritten card. Love doesn't need a signature." Naomi told me to keep the rhythm just like that, enough for them to see you as fragile, and enough so they don't realize the walls have gone up around them. 3 days later, Victor sent me a link. It was Serena's new social post. A photo of her by a pool, cocktail in hand, captioned, "Life is for enjoying. Anyone who works their whole life deserves a break sometimes." Victor took a screenshot, saved it with a timestamp. "I save everything," he wrote. "Every line can become evidence of a lifestyle that doesn't match lawful income." 2 days after that, Marcus posted in front of a new house, caption, $360,000 for a new dream within reach. I looked at the photo lights blazing on a golden afternoon, then put my phone down. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just smiled. Maybe because now, every one of their actions was writing its own record. That night, once the house was quiet, I sat alone in the study, desk lamp reflecting off the window pane. I took paper and pen and began a handwritten letter to myself. The day Claudine protected Claudine. Today, I'm no longer a victim. 3 specialists confirmed my mind is as steady as ever. My son chose another road, but I choose justice. And I will see it through, not for revenge, but to reclaim my name. I folded the paper, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in the small drawer by my bed, the same spot where I used to keep Marcus's childhood birthday cards. A reminder, some battles need only one witness: yourself. The next morning, Naomi called with news. The freeze order takes effect at 9 a.m. They'll know soon, but they won't be able to do anything. She paused, then added, "I'm arranging a private confrontation at your home with recording and a legal access. Witness, Victor will be there. You just need to prep the key documents grouped and easy to pull. I looked around the room. On the table, stacks of papers lay like pieces of a life finally put back in order. I began sorting, placing each set into 3 thick plastic folders. Bold labels. 1. Money statements, transfers, invoices, photos of assets. 2. Papers, powers of attorney, contracts, certifications, notarized records. 3. Conspiracy emails, texts, images, Victor's annotated notes. I labeled them in red, the letters even and firm. Each folder was a small wall in the larger fortress Naomi and I were building. By late afternoon, I brewed black tea and sat on the front porch. The street was calm, like there'd never been a storm. Kids shouted over a game of catch. The breeze carried cut grass scent. I closed my eyes and listened to my heartbeat slow, steady. I thought of the women who used to come to my clinic when I was a nurse, women who endured abuse in silence and never stood. I used to tell them, protect yourself, but only now do I feel the full weight of those words. I smiled. Maybe I am old, but old doesn't mean weak. As dusk thinned, my phone buzzed. A text from Victor, Naomi confirmed 9 a.m. Friday. Confrontation at your place. I'll bring recording gear and a court witness. Your one job? Stay calm. Let them talk. I set the phone down and looked at the darkening sky. The curtain lifted in the breeze. The room light fell over the sealed folders. I stood and touched each plastic cover like laying hands on the first bricks of a wall of justice. For the first time in months, I felt safe in my own house. No longer a place of trespass or deceit, but a defensive line for the truth. And when Naomi walked in Friday morning, I would be ready not just with evidence, but with the certainty that the woman named Claudine Crawford had saved herself. Friday morning, the house was so still I could hear the wall clock tick. I set the 3 folders on the dining table. Money, papers, conspiracy. Morning light poured through the window, glazing each plastic cover with a steel sheen. Naomi arrived 15 minutes early, with Victor and a man in a gray suit wearing a small badge. Witness officer, court verification. He was the independent court witness. They set up the recorder, checked the batteries, and Naomi whispered, "Let everything unfold naturally. Don't get angry. The truth will speak for you." At 9:05 a.m., the doorbell rang. Marcus stood outside, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, car keys in hand, eyes mixing irritation and worry. "You called me over like it's urgent. What is this?" I smiled lightly. "Come in, Marcus. I made tea." We sat facing each other. Naomi gave a brief intro. Today's meeting is being recorded, with a court witness and legal representatives present. Purpose: to clarify financial issues between Miss Claudine Crawford and Mr. Marcus. Crawford, Marcus smirked, folding his arms. "I have nothing to hide." I poured tea, slid a cup to him. "Good. Then let's treat this like a talk between mother and son." I opened the first folder, money. Bank statements spread neatly, tight columns of numbers marked in red. I pointed to the summary on the last page, $87,000 withdrawn over 2 years. "This is the money transferred or withdrawn from my accounts, Marcus. Can you explain it?" He raised his brows, confidence thick in his voice. "Did you forget? I have power of attorney. I'm just managing for you. It's all legitimate." I nodded slightly, then opened the papers folder. "You're right. I did sign a power of attorney. But today, I want you to look at a few other things." I placed in front of him Serena's emails, the diamond bracelet photo, the car invoice, and Victor's printout for the Investment for Mom account. Marcus stared, shifting from sure to shaken. When he reached the line, "Funds withdrawn from Claudine Crawford retirement account," his face went pale. "Where did you get this?" "From the same banking systems I don't understand, like you said," I answered evenly. "They worked with investigator Victor Hale. And this," I tapped the table, "is why I asked you here today." Naomi spoke up, calm. "Mr. Marcus, formally, all accounts tied to your name, Miss Serena's and my client have been temporarily frozen by a South Carolina court order, effective as of 9 a.m. today." Marcus swung to me, stunned. "What did you do? Are you suing your own son?" I met his eyes. "No, I'm not suing you. I'm protecting a lifetime of work, something you forgot a long time ago." He threw a glare at Naomi. "You're exploiting my mother. She doesn't understand finance. She's just parroting someone who's blowing this up." Naomi didn't flinch. "Miss Claudine is fully competent. I have medical evaluations from 3 independent specialists confirming her capacity capacity. Would you like to see them? I slid the medical report onto the table. Marcus stared at the stamped pages, his lips trembling. Mom, what did you get tested for? To show I'm not crazy, not senile, and not too confused to recognize theft, I said. The air turned thick. Victor stayed silent, writing steadily. The court witness checked his watch, confirming the recorder was running. Marcus sighed, then shifted into a pleading tone. Mom, this is a misunderstanding. I used the money to invest, to grow the family's assets. I had no bad intentions. I tilted my head. Investing from my accounts, titled to you and your wife, with profits withdrawn into sub-accounts? If that's investing, then there's no such thing as fraud, Marcus. He snapped, voice rising. I did that for you. You don't get finance. You don't know how to manage money. Without me, some dumb advisor would have taken it all. I was quiet for a few seconds, then set down the last paper, Dr. Hartwell's decision capacity letter. This is official, Marcus. I fully understand everything you just said, including your attempt to justify misappropriation. I don't need anyone to manage me. I need the honesty you lost. He locked onto the page, fists balling. He stammered, What are you going to do to me? I drew a slow breath, voice even, cool. I'll give you two choices. 1. Return the entire $87,000 and sign a restitution agreement. 2. I make everything public from emails and photos to the plan to put me in assisted living. The court and the press will do the rest. He shot to his feet, the chair skidding over. You're destroying this family! I looked at my son, the face that once made me proud, now twisted by fear and anger. This family broke, I said slowly, the night you shoved me in my own living room. Marcus froze. Shame and fury flickered in his eyes. Then he turned, stormed out, and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the glass. No one followed. Naomi quietly stopped the recording. I sat still, listening to the car engine rev and fade. Only the scent of cooled tea and the echo of a battle just fought lingered. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Serena's name flashed on the screen. I wasn't going to answer, but Naomi nodded. Put it on speaker. Everything gets recorded. I tapped accept. Serena's voice came sharp as a blade. You think you're smart? You're smearing your own family. I swear I'll make all your friends believe you're delusional. You don't deserve sympathy, I answered, my voice barely above a breath. Thank you for saying that, Serena. I'll be saving that promise. She hung up. The cold beep was the only reply. Naomi saved the audio to evidence, verbal threats. Victor gave me a small nod. We have enough. That afternoon in Slanting, a light across the steps, Naomi opened her laptop and logged into the state court portal. She typed, attached everything statements, emails, photos, audio, medical evaluations, Victor's investigation report. Then she turned and asked softly, do you want me to submit? I looked out the window, my small lavender garden, where I used to sit and knit for Marcus when he was a sweet little boy. I breathed in and nodded. Send it, Naomi. She moved the pointer and clicked submit filing. A short click sounded small but heavy, like a door locking behind someone. Naomi closed the laptop and said slowly, the formal complaint is filed. From here on out, it belongs to justice. After they left, I stayed alone in the kitchen. The late sun turned the papers gold. I brushed my hand over the folders, feeling the grit of the plastic under my fingertips. Maybe for the first time in years, I stood straight, not bracing against impact, but knowing I'd done the right thing. I walked to the window and looked down the street. There was no hatred left, only the quiet of someone who's just set the last brick in a wall of justice. I spoke softly, a farewell to the son I once trusted with my whole life. You chose your path, Marcus. I'm just choosing the truth. The freeze news spread faster than I expected. Only 3 days after Naomi filed, all of Marcus and Serena's bank cards were declined, and auto payments stopped. Serena posted a vague line, some people can't let go, even when they're old, then deleted it 10 minutes later. Victor had already captured it. That night, Marcus called, irritated. What did you do to my accounts? They said there's a court order. I can't pull a dime. I answered slowly, each word clear. You're just temporarily returning what you owe me. He went silent for a few seconds, then hung up. 2 days later, Victor texted, the sports car was towed, illegally pawned impound hold. I looked at the screen and didn't feel joy, just a light, bittersweet relief. The bright red car that once screamed their pride now sat quietly in a financial crimes impound lot. Next, Marcus's company announced he was suspended pending internal review, and Serena, the self-styled brand image manager, was placed on indefinite leave after a small online article. Young couple accused of misappropriating an elderly relative's assets. The photo showed Marcus ducking into a car, hand over his face, with Serena behind him in oversized sunglasses. Their social feeds went silent. Earlier posts, trips, wine, fine dinners were scrubbed. The fancy friends who used to like and comment vanished like they'd never existed. I didn't gloat. It felt like a tired kind of justice, the kind you reach only after walking through a storm. Meanwhile, club dues, spa fees, and credit card bills piled up. Late fees climbed by the day. Victor told me in a flat voice with a hint of irony. They called the bank 5 times in 2 days. Every time, the same question. Any way to unlock it temporarily? There wasn't. The court had signed. A freeze means every money path is closed. One afternoon, Naomi brought the local paper. Front page headline, bold. Son accused of taking money from 70-year-old mother in Charleston. Below was a long piece, plain and detailed, quoting attorney Naomi Blake. This isn't a financial dispute. It's an abuse of entrusted power, one of the most insidious and cruel crimes against older adults. I looked at the paper, heart buzzing and heavy. I didn't want to be known, and I didn't want my son named. But to stop a swindler, sometimes you have to flood the dark with light. 2 days later, Marcus called again. His tone had changed, less sharp, edged with fatigue, almost desperation. Mom, can we talk? No lawyers, no paperwork. Just mother and son. I waited a few seconds, then said, I'll listen, but all calls are recorded from now on. You know that. He exhaled, heavy, like something collapsing. Mom, I was wrong. I just wanted to help. Serena said everything was legal. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't interrupt. On the other end, he went on, they've put me on hold at work. We can't cover the mortgage. I need you to withdraw the complaint. Please. I looked out the window, afternoon light on the honey-colored frame. You don't need to ask me, Marcus. You need to apologize to yourself for letting greed take you too far. Silence. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. Serena pushed me. She said she'd leave if I didn't. I was stupid. I only said, some choices you can't blame away, Marcus. You signed. You own it. That night, Serena called. Not pleading, spitting. You won, but you'll regret this. You ruined your son's life. I answered evenly. No, Serena. You two did that yourselves. She sneered. I'll countersue for defamation. You won't have peace. I set the phone on the table so Victor could record the whole thing. When it ended, he said, her voice shook. That means she knows she's about to lose. The next day, Naomi sent them a formal settlement proposal. Miss Claudine will consider resolution if the defendants return all misappropriated amounts, assets, goods, and cash, and issue a public apology in court. I didn't add a word, just agreed in silence. Naomi said, your silence is the strongest collateral. You don't need to threaten justice, Will. Marcus replied 2 days later. I need time. Serena sent a long message full of venom, blame, mockery, and begging. I didn't answer. Everything went to Victor's archive. I started another task, a restitution list. On paper, I itemized everything they bought with my money. Red sports car, $68,000. Maison Luxe furnishings, $17,000. Napa 40. Valley trip, $9,200. Diamond bracelet, $12,000. Club membership, $5,000 per year. Cosmetic procedures, $8,500. A total of more than $119,000. I added below, all must be returned or sold for restitution. Then I signed and sent it to Naomi to forward. No threats, no anger, just a dry ledger like an invoice from justice. A few days later, Victor checked in. They're turning on each other. Marcus says Serena kept all the files and forced him to sign. Serena says Marcus masterminded it. Internal meltdown. He sent me an audio clip from a permitted source close to them. You told me to sign, now you're dumping it on me? Serena, voice pitched high. Don't make things up. It was your idea, Marcus. I have proof, Marcus. Don't test me. Victor chuckled. We don't have to lift a finger. They're self-destructing. Meanwhile, neighbors started stepping up. Mrs. Heller, the one Serena tried to buy, came to Naomi, voice shaky but firm. I want to make it right. She asked me to lie that Miss Claudine was forgetful, but she's always been sharp. I saw everything, not just Mrs. Heller. Mr. Perry across the street submitted a statement. Serena often pretended to help Miss say, Claudine carry things, and then whispered, "Did you remember your meds?" Even though I knew she didn't take any. Naomi smiled as she showed me the affidavits. Sometimes justice doesn't need a shout, Claudine. It just needs a few people to tell the truth. A week later, a letter from the court arrived. Notice of mandatory mediation date. The first session was set for the 18th of next month. Reading that line, I felt still not afraid, but like a shift from fighting to finishing. Naomi looked at me gentle. "Do you want to negotiate? We have enough to win outright." I answered, "Naomi, winning isn't for revenge. I just want the truth back. If they return it all and apologize, I'm willing to stop." She nodded, a soft and steady smile. "That's why you win, Claudine, because you don't need to crush anyone to stand." That evening, I sat on the porch in the old wicker chair. The night was quiet, only insects and lavender on the air. I remembered the early days when Marcus was small. Whenever he got a bad grade, he'd bury his face in my lap and say, "Don't be mad. I just want you to be proud." Now I only wish he'd kept some of what those words meant. I murmured to the wind, "Reputation can fall, money can go, but a conscience once lost, you can't buy it back, son." I closed my eyes and let the night breeze comb through my gray hair. There was no fear left. Only the peace of knowing justice, slow as it is, was very close. The mediation room at the Charleston courthouse isn't big, but it feels heavy. Not because of the space, because of the air. The smell of new paper, wet ink, and cold coffee on the table. It all blends into something familiar, yet distant, like the scent of a truth waiting to be written. I sat on one side of the long table, Naomi and Victor beside me. Across from us, Marcus and Serena. They avoided my eyes. Marcus wore a white shirt with sleeves rolled up, his wrist faintly trembling. Serena sat ramrod straight in a gray fitted dress, face arranged in a polite, artificial smile. Between us, the court mediator, a middle-aged woman with a calm voice, opened with the standard line, "We're not here to judge. We're here to find common ground." Naomi leaned toward me and whispered, "Let me handle the opening. When it's time, say just one line, short and clear." I nodded. Naomi opened her leather case and set down a thick stack of files. She laid them out one by one, her voice low but carrying. "This is the cash flow chart prepared by financial investigator Victor. Hail from bank data. A total of $87,000 was withdrawn over 2 years, most of it routed into the defendant's sub-accounts." She moved to the second folder and opened photos of shopping, receipts, and emails. Serena in the jewelry store, Marcus signing the car papers, spa statements, club membership receipts, and the email thread titled, "The Old Lady Signed." The other side began to stir. Serena folded her arms with a faint, mocking smile, while Marcus kept his head down, sweat beading on his forehead. Naomi flipped to the next page, the checklist for staging memory loss that I had found in Serena's inbox. As the court can see, this isn't just a financial matter. It's a deliberate, planned act of abuse to seize an elder's property. The room was so quiet you could hear the court clerk's pen scratching in the corner. Opposing counsel, a man about 10 years younger than Naomi, stood to respond. He said the familiar things, "My clients do not deny mistakes in financial management, but they maintain there was no intent to misappropriate. The withdrawals were authorized, and part of the funds were used for family property maintenance." Naomi only lifted the corner of her mouth. "Maintenance with a diamond bracelet and a trip to Napa Valley?" The room went dead still. The mediator reminded softly, "Please remain calm." Marcus clenched his hands, speaking low but hard. "Mom, why do you have to take it this far? We can negotiate." I lifted my head and looked straight into my son's eyes. "You can negotiate with someone else, but with the truth, no one gets to bargain." The other side made their first offer. "My clients are willing to repay $50,000 within 12 months, on the condition that this file remains sealed and not released to the media." Naomi didn't need long. She tapped her pen lightly, voice firm. "No, my client will not sell her dignity for silence. Miss Claudine Crawford has suffered enough. She doesn't need more money, she needs the truth on the record." Marcus whipped towards Serena, voice laced with panic. "You said we could settle." Serena shot back, eyes flashing. "Shut up. You're the one who signed everything." Their argument burst out, forcing the mediator to step in. I said nothing. I just rested my hand on the cooled teacup, my heart as calm as a still lake. When they asked for my final word. I said one sentence. I only want the truth recorded. The mediator looked at me for a long moment, then wrote that line into the minutes. The session dragged on more than 3 hours. In the end, the other side admitted to mismanaging funds, agreed to repay $30,000 immediately, but still dodged the words intent to misappropriate. Naomi didn't sign. She looked at me, then across the table. Mediation has not produced an agreement. We'll let the court decide openly. As she stood, the chairs scraped with a dry rasp. Serena staggered a bit, forcing a smile. Do you really want to make a spectacle of yourself? You want the press writing about your son again? I answered softly, barely a breath. No, I want justice to write it for me. The court officially moved the case to a public trial phase. News spread that week. People who knew Marcus started whispering. Victor showed me a few new photos he'd gathered. Marcus and Serena in a luxury watch shop, talking to a clerk about selling to raise money for lawyers. Their faces drawn, clothes wrinkled, smiles stiff. Victor set the photo in front of me. Sometimes justice doesn't need to pound on the door. It just needs a mirror. Naomi stayed busy preparing for trial, and I quietly did something of my own. I went to the notary's office with the smell of ink and the hum of photocopiers to sign an amendment to my will. I sat up straight and read line by line. Miss Claudine Crawford, being fully of sound mind, hereby revokes all inheritance provisions related to Marcus Crawford and Serena Crawford. All assets, including real property and savings accounts, are bequeathed to the Fund for Older Adults Victimized by Financial Abuse. When I finished signing, I took a deep breath. The pen trembled slightly in my hand, but the strokes were steady. The elderly notary smiled. You seem very sure. I nodded. I've never been more sure in my life. The night before trial, I didn't read filings or check messages. I just sat in the living room, warm light glowing over old frames. Frank's photo, my husband, rested on the shelf, his gentle smile the same as ever. I spoke softly, low and even. Frank, tomorrow is our day. The day I stop being treated as frail and stand as someone who knows her worth. I touched the silver hair clip he'd given me on our 25th anniversary. A simple gift, small, but a promise he'd be with me no matter how life turned. I pinned it in my hair and looked in the mirror. The woman there was no longer a victim. Her eyes were bright, wrinkles and all, no longer cast down. The next morning, Charleston was crisp. I pulled on a brown coat, took my case file, and stepped out the door. Naomi waited in the car with an encouraging smile. Ready? I said. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. That means I'm ready. As the car turned down the road to the courthouse, I smoothed my hair and felt the silver clip still there, cool, steady, like Frank's hand on my shoulder. Outside, the courthouse rose with tall white columns, bright in the morning sun. Ink, coffee, and footsteps echoed through the halls, the smell of a truth coming close. I walked in with my head high. No fear, no tears. Only Claudine Crawford, a woman who chose the truth, even when truth smelled like sharp ink and a bleeding heart. On the morning of the trial, Charleston was wet with mist. I stood on the white stone steps beneath the flag, each footfall on the marble echoing like my heartbeat, calm but resolute. Naomi walked beside me, files tight to her chest. Victor followed, face stern, eyes bright like a man who'd set every piece right where it needed to go. The gallery was unusually full. Local reporters, a few neighbors, and older folks I didn't know. Maybe they came to hear their own story through someone else's. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The room sank into the heavy quiet of justice. The prosecutor began in a steady voice. No theatrics. This is not merely a civil dispute. It's a clear example of exploiting trust between a mother and son, between family and money. The evidence shows non-transparent transfers of assets and an attempt to falsify the plaintiff's legal capacity. Naomi stood, her voice warm but unyielding. My client, Miss Claudine Crawford, 70 years old, does not seek pity. She seeks the simplest thing, recognition that she is competent, clear-minded, and entitled to defend the work of her life. I looked around the courtroom. Marcus sat on the right, gaunt, hands knit tight. Serena beside him, eyes puffy from crying, still trying to look composed. I felt no hatred, only a distance that couldn't be bridged. Naomi called the first witness Dr. Hartwell, a geriatric capacity specialist. White coat on, he carefully opened a thick file. After 3 independent evaluations, he said, "Miss Crawford meets all criteria for cognition, memory, and decision-making. There is no sign of cognitive decline, and she takes no psychotropic medications." Any power of attorney documents signed under the defendant's guidance did not reflect her actual mental state, Naomi asked. In your opinion, if someone signs documents while being steered by false information, is that consent legally valid? No, he said. That's deliberate deception. The room fell quiet. Serena bowed her head, biting her lip. Then Victor. He stepped to the stand, set down his tablet, and mirrored it to the big screen. Dozens of bank transactions, photos, and cash flow graphs appeared. His voice was firm, no gloss. A total of $87,000 was withdrawn from Miss Crawford's retirement accounts over 2 years. Withdrawals were broken into 2-week cycles, amounts from $500 to $1,500, a common technique to avoid bank flags. Many were routed into accounts under Marcus and Serena Crawford. He tapped to the next slide. Up came Serena in the jewelry store, Marcus signing the sports car invoice, and an email with the subject line, "POA done, next, sell, or assisted living." Each click cut through the "for the family" facade. The prosecutor nodded. "Nothing further," Naomi continued. She asked to read aloud an email between Serena and a friend. Her voice stayed slow, no flourish, letting their own words do the work. The old lady signed. "Marcus says she trusts us completely. Once the transfer is done, we can move fast. If she starts asking questions, remind her of her memory problems. People believe that easily at her age." The last line hit like an invisible blade. No one spoke. Serena's tears slid down. Marcus shut his eyes. I sat still, hands folded, hearing only my steady heart. When called, Marcus visibly shook. He avoided my eyes. His voice thinned as he answered, I didn't mean harm. I was just managing for Mom. I thought she needed financial supervision because she forgets." Serena said so. Naomi stepped closer. "Were you authorized to transfer funds from your mother's account into accounts held by you and your wife?" He was silent for a few seconds, then said softly, "No, there's no document allowing that." Naomi lowered her voice. "Then would you consider that misappropriation?" Marcus faltered, eyes red. At last he said, "I guess, yes." The judge, a silver-haired man with a calm, deep voice, leaned back and read a preliminary finding. "The court finds that the transfers lacked lawful consent and that the power of attorney execution occurred under materially false information. The defendant's conduct constitutes financial deception against an older adult." He rapped the gavel lightly and read each order clearly. The court orders: 1. The defendants, Marcus and Serena Crawford, shall repay $87,000 plus additional damages for a total of $125,000 to the plaintiff. 2. All powers of attorney executed under deception are nullified. 3. A public apology to the plaintiff is required in court today and in the local newspaper. 4. Permanent revocation of the defendant's access to the plaintiff's accounts and property. 5. A restraining order establishing a 200-meter no-contact radius around the plaintiff. The room held a breath. Serena broke into tears, covering her face. Marcus bent forward, hands trembling on the chair's edge. I didn't look at them. There was nothing left to say. As the clerk reread the judgment for signature, Naomi turned to me, eyes bright, not exactly with joy. "We won, Claudine." I shook my head gently. "No, Naomi. Justice won. As for me, I just got my name back on paper." A reporter heard and jotted it down. The next night, the Charleston Daily ran the headline, "70-year-old mother, I'm not getting revenge. I'm taking my name back on paper." I left the courthouse as the afternoon sun dropped. A light breeze moved through the magnolia trees, sweet and soft like life's quiet hello. On the steps, Naomi took my hand. A young hand and an old one, laced together a bridge between pain and trust. I said softly, "Thank you, not only for the case, but for helping me stand upright." Naomi smiled. "You stood on your own, Claudine. I just reminded you that you could." Victor nodded his goodbye. "When the dust settles, do something just for you." I nodded. "I will." That evening, I came home to my kitchen. The place that once echoed with arguments now held only the scent of lemon and ginger. I cooked lemon braised chicken, Frank's favorite, a dish I hadn't dared make in years because it hurt to remember when our family finally felt whole. The pot simmered, steam fogging the glass. I stood and listened to the clock tick, feeling my heart as light as kitchen smoke. Not the thrill of victory, just the calm of someone who'd stepped out of the dark. I sat at the table, poured tea, and wrote a few lines in my old notebook. Today I learned that silence can be the strongest testimony. No shouting, no striking back, just let the truth speak. I set down the pen and smiled. Outside, a thin new moon rose, quiet as a period at the end of my life's verdict. 3 months after the trial, I left Charleston. That city, its church bells and cobblestone. The streets had once been my whole world, but now it was only an echo of wounds. I wasn't running. I wanted a different start, quiet and clean. I bought a small house in Santa Rosa, California, in the wine valley, where mornings pour out gold and the breeze carries ripe grapes. 2 bedrooms, a wood porch, and a tiny backyard. The previous owner left 2 rows of lavender and a climbing rose trellis heavy with buds. I stood for a long time, breathing deep, like my chest finally opened after a year cinched tight. On moving day, I rehung the crystal chandelier that had been repaired since the party night shattering. When I turned it on, warm gold washed the kitchen, a private kind of justice. I'm still here, still upright, still strong enough to begin again. I rebuilt my days with the care of someone who once lost everything to a single word: trust. First, I hired an independent financial advisor, a woman named Meryl, around 50, blunt and warm. She set up separate accounts, fraud alerts, and a retirement plan with safe investments. Meryl joked, "From now on, only you touch your money, Claudine. If anyone else asks, tell them to call me." I laughed my first unforced laugh in a long time. I also changed the safe code, memorizing a sequence only I know. On the inside of the door, I taped a small handwritten note. Don't sign without reading. Don't agree without asking your lawyer. Don't trust if your gut isn't calm. 3 short lines, a wall to guard me against my own blind kindness. Mornings, I started aqua aerobics at the public pool. At first I was shy, an old body, sunspots, a head of gray with nothing to show off. But after a few classes, I realized no one cared. Women from 70 to 80 laughed, splashed, and told life stories like age was just a number floating on the water. One said, "We don't come to get younger. We come to remind our bodies they're still alive." It moved me so much I turned away to hide my tears. In the afternoons, I joined a small book club at the Santa Rosa Library. The first week, they discussed The Housekeeper and the Professor, about a man with short-term memory loss who kept his kindness. When I shared my thoughts, a silver-haired woman squeezed my hand. "You talk like you've lived it," I smiled. Maybe I have. In another way, I didn't lose memory. I once lost trust. They nodded, eyes warm. I didn't need to say more. People who've been hurt recognize each other without much talk. My neighbor, Mr. Elliott, is a widower in his 60s who gardens part-time. The day I moved in, he brought a bouquet of purple asters, his voice low and kind. In Santa Rosa, we say asters bring peace to new beginnings. I took the flowers, my throat tight. It had been a long time since a welcome came without a hidden question. That night, arranging them in a vase, I realized here I wasn't alone. I just lived by myself, and that's different. One afternoon, while I was making tea, the phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew my son's voice at once. Marcus. His voice was low, slow, a little rough. "Mom, I'm in therapy. The doctor says I should call and talk, even just a little." I was quiet a few seconds, then answered evenly, "I'm glad you're healing. We all have to relearn how to be kind to ourselves." Marcus paused, then asked softly, "Can you forgive me?" I looked out at the garden, where sunlight cut through the rose trellis, and answered gently, "Forgiveness, yes, Marcus, but the boundary stays." He whispered, "Okay," then hung up. I set the phone down. My heart didn't hurt anymore, only a small warmth, like a stitched wound that no longer bleeds when the weather turns cold. A few days later, Serena texted, "I'm sorry. I truly am. Just 4 words, nothing more." I stared for a moment and turned off the phone. I wasn't angry, and I didn't reply. I wanted the silence to be a door closing softly. That evening, I turned on the kitchen chandelier. Light scattered across the walls in shimmering pieces. I sat at the table with my tea and wrote, "Sometimes forgiveness isn't saying, 'I forgive you.' It's stopping someone from occupying your mind." I started caring about small things I once labeled luxuries. One morning at the local market, a coral dress hung in a little shop window. Bright, a bit bold for my age, but when I touched it, I felt my spirits lift like a girl's. The shopkeeper smiled. "Buying it for an occasion?" "No occasion," I said, "just because I like it." And I bought it. That afternoon, I wore it to walk the garden, my hair drying in the breeze. That feeling simple, quiet, not because someone allowed it, but because I chose it, was richer than any jewelry. At sunset, I sat on the porch and opened the leather journal Frank once gave me. The pages had yellowed, edged with the scent of time. I wrote slowly, like talking to myself. Freedom doesn't arrive with a winning judgment or a new house. It begins with one right no. No signing when you doubt. No swallowing insults. No silence when truth needs a voice. And never asking permission to live as yourself. I set down the pen and listened to the wind move through the trellis, rose petals brushing the glass. At 70, I don't dream of a perfect life. I just want each small day wide enough to breathe, long enough to smile, and peaceful enough to fall asleep lighthearted. The chandelier flickered softly, light dancing on the walls. I closed my eyes and told myself, "Claudine, you've passed through the storm. Now live what remains light as the breeze, steady as this glow." And in my little kitchen, the clock's tick blended with my even breathing a normal rhythm, with a new name, freedom. 18 months have passed since the trial ended. Spring in Santa Rosa arrived like a sigh. The rose trellis at my porch has covered the white fence, heavy with blooms. I brewed a pot of Earl Grey and set it on the small porch table, watching morning light pour over each petal. The wind through the lavender filled my little house with a gentle sweetness. If someone asked what happiness looks like at 70, I'd point to this: a woman, a cup of tea, and peace that's no longer up for negotiation. Once I'd settled, the Santa Rosa Community Center invited me to speak about preventing financial abuse of older adults. They'd found me through that old article. I hesitated, then agreed not to retell pain, but to turn it into a map for the lost. It was a Saturday afternoon. A small, warm room, chairs filled with silver hair, mostly women, a few older men with their daughters. I began with my story, nothing added and nothing cut. I spoke about the party and the shove, the signatures I didn't read, the inbox of plots, and how I stood up not with rage, but with law and a steady mind. I laid out red flags everyone should watch for when someone asks you to sign without a clear explanation, when you're brushed off with, "You don't need to understand, Mom," when money leaves your account and the explanation sounds too smooth. Then, the first steps to protect yourself: organize documents, verify accounts, find an independent lawyer, and don't be ashamed to ask for help. The room was quiet, but for the soft scratch of pens. A grandmother in the front row, eyes wet, asked, "Miss Claudine, how do you start over when it's your own child who hurt you?" I smiled gently. "Begin by loving yourself, because loving yourself isn't selfish. It's the fence that protects every other love." She nodded, and I saw eyes around the room grow warm like little candles lit one from another. That night, when I got home, a hand-addressed envelope waited in my mailbox, from Marcus. I opened it. The letters trembled. "Mom, I'm learning how to live decently again. I understand the emptiness. I'm Mom, made for myself. I'm not asking to come back. I just want you to know I'm trying to be someone you could be proud of even from a distance." I didn't cry. I sat for a long time, my fingers tracing my son's handwriting, then set the letter in the small wooden box on my desk where I keep things that once hurt but now only testify to growth. I didn't write back. Some stories don't need an ending, just quiet, so time can do the rest. I kept living simply, as if each day were its own reward. Mornings I watered flowers, afternoons I read in sunlight falling across the page. On good weather days, Mr. Elliot would drop by with a small basket of apples or a few asters. We didn't say much, just traded smiles, the silent language of people who've lost and still trust in kindness. Now and then, Serena sent short texts. "I'm working again and trying to live better." I didn't reply, but I didn't delete them. My silence wasn't hatred. It was a gentle, locked door so I could breathe inside my own house. Every evening, I switched on the kitchen chandelier. Light shimmered across the ceiling and down to the oak table where I sat with tea, watching the little shards dance. I remembered the night I was shoved to the floor, and I smiled. Because from that moment, I stood up. No one lifted me but my dignity. One weekend afternoon, I cleared my desk and boxed old papers. When I stacked the file labeled Case Hale, I wrote one last line on the cover. The ending isn't in the judgment, it's in how we choose to live after. I donated the file to the community center to use in their trainings. The director looked moved. Your story will help others avoid the same mistakes, I said. I just want those who come after to know dignity is not for bargaining. As the sun tilted west, light passed through the crystal and painted thin rainbows on the wall. I sat and opened the old leather journal, Frank's, now filled. I wrote the final line of my journey. Don't let anyone write the conclusion to your life. I closed the journal and shut the window but didn't lock it. I understood. Locking your heart doesn't make you safer. Locking out the right people does. Outside, the wind rustled the rose trellis, petals falling to damp soil, as soft as forgiveness. I watched, knowing life will bring new scratches, but this time I wear armor made of self-respect and trust in myself. Thank you for staying to this moment. I don't know where you're watching from, maybe a noisy city, maybe a quiet room like mine, but if this story touched you, even by a line, I hope it sparks a boundary, a memory, or a wake-up call for someone you love. If you've ever had to learn to say no to protect yourself, leave a comment. And if you want to walk with me through the next chapters of healing, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Every comment and view is a small light that helps this story find the people who crashed. I look into the camera and smile softly. I'm Claudine, 70 years old, and I'm still beginning. The crystal light shimmers behind me, glinting like a quiet period at the end of a life I've learned to rewrite with my own hands.